Hello, I'm Gerald Schoenewolf, a psychoanalyst and writer. I've just published a new book called Lizzie. It's a biographical novel about Lizzie Borden, which I think is the most authentic portrait of her ever written. I'd like to read you a chapter from the book about when she was molested by her father when she was 6 years old. Chapter 5. It was very dark in Daddy's room, and Lizzie could barely see her daddy. A little bit of moonlight was coming from the window, only enough for her to make out the whites of his eyes. She could smell the sweet Cuban cigar smoke in his beard and the bittersweet aroma of his underarms. It was dark, but she was very awake, and the room was more alive than it had ever been before. Daddy's eyes were flashing at her, and she felt his big arm around her and his big hand on her. "Daddy, is this all right?" "Yes, Lizzie, it's all right. Just lie still." "Daddy, lie still." Lizzie was happy and afraid and confused at the same time. She had wanted it to happen and had thought about it and dreamed about it, but now that it was happening, she did not want to know it was happening. She was in Daddy's bed, and he was acting funny. His eyes were turning in a funny way, and his voice had a hard tone, and things were happening that he had told her would never happen, and yet they were now happening. She liked what her daddy was doing, and it felt weirdly good, but she remembered that her daddy had told her that it was a sin. He had told her over and over that it would be a sin to do anything like this before marriage. Daddy's voice was funny, and he said, "Lie still, Lizzie." And he was touching her under her nightgown in a way he had never done before, the way maybe he had touched Mommy. He was doing something sinful, at least it seemed sinful, but she wasn't sure about anything, and the dark was all around, and his eyes were flashing like it was all right. "I feel so happy," she thought. "I guess. But isn't this a sin? Maybe I am bad. Maybe God can see us and he thinks we are bad. But I don't feel bad. I feel good." She looked out the window at the stars and wondered if one of them was the Almighty God blessing her. "Daddy, I love you." "I love you too, Angel." "We aren't married yet, are we?" "No, we're not. Put your hand there, Angel." A while later, she and her daddy were lying side by side, and her head was resting on his chest. Suddenly his head started rising and falling and pushing up and sliding down, and that made her head bounce up and down on his chest. She heard him growl and whimper, and she did not know why. His arms went around her, and he was squeezing her so tightly that it was hard for her to breathe. And then she heard a big moan, and then his chest bumped her head up and down, and a sob came out. Then he was crying out in the dark, and she was scared because she had never heard her daddy crying. His beard was tickling her forehead as his breath blew out of it against her bangs, making them ripple. His chin was trembling against her cheek, and she felt one of her tears fall hotly down her cheek and to her chin. She put her arms halfway around him until she was able to pat his back. "It's all right, Daddy. Don't cry." When she said that, Daddy suddenly stopped crying, and he sat up, and she felt his big hands on her two shoulders, pushing her away. "No, it's not all right," he snapped in a deep, growly voice. "This is your fault. You did this." She fell away, stunned, gawking at him in the dark, and she did not know what to say. Then he spoke to her in a strange hiss. "Get away from me. You're a bad girl." She could feel a gust of his breath hit her nose. "You are evil," he added, turning away. The word evil seemed to knock her down. She had a fantasy that the word evil had shot into some deep corner of her brain and was sticking there like a nail. "Daddy?" she asked. She did not know if he was still her daddy. She did not understand what he was saying. He was looking at her as if she were a snake that was about to bite him. I'm not a snake, she thought. I'm not evil. I don't understand. She felt that everything was falling away from her. The bed, the house, the town, and the world. And she was all alone. This is your fault, her daddy said again. She could see his eyes in the dark like Halloween eyes, and she was very scared. Daddy, what's wrong? She called out. All at once he yanked up her nightgown. His hands were rough when he grabbed her, and his eyes were hard and mean. We have sinned, he snarled. Do you feel my hands? This is a sin. We have sinned against the Lord. Yes, Daddy. He pushed her away again and sat way up. She was lying down, and his head was way up there, and it was like he had gone to another land, even though he was still there. Do not ever tell anybody about this. This never happened. Do you understand? Nothing happened. His voice was as sharp as the wail of a wolf. Don't worry, Daddy. I'll never tell anybody. It's our secret, she said. Yes, exactly. Our secret. That's exactly what it is, and it will never happen again. Never. All right, Daddy. Now go back to your room. Why, Daddy? She had not slept in her own room for over a month. I said go back to your room. He turned on the lamp, got up, and pulled her roughly off the bed. Let's go, he said, dragging her out of the room. From now on, you will sleep in your room. Emma was standing outside Daddy's bedroom door. She had been standing there for a while, listening to the low voices in the room, hearing her father's moans, her father's silence, and her father's harsh voice snapping, "Stop it," and "evil," and nothing happened. Lizzie followed her daddy out of the room and saw her sister turning away and running to the dark corner. Did she hear? Lizzie wondered. Does she know the secret? Her daddy did not see Emma. He was pulling Lizzie to her door as Emma ran and hid in the corner. After Daddy returned to his room and slammed his door, Emma ran to Lizzie's door and listened. Inside her room, Lizzie lay on her bed with her eyes wide open. She did not understand anything that had happened. Everything had been so strange and magical and scary. She did not know why her daddy called her that word. She did not know how she could be evil if she was his angel. She could not understand anything. She did not know why he had cried or why he had shoved her away. Daddy is just in a bad mood, she thought. He will be nicer tomorrow. She closed her eyes and fell into a dream. She dreamed that she was a grown-up and she was standing on the altar in front of the congregation and she was getting ready to marry her daddy. Daddy was wearing a black suit and she was all dressed up in a long white wedding gown like the ones she had seen in magazines, and she was grown up and almost as tall as Daddy. Sally, the church organist, started playing the wedding march. Emma was sitting in the front pew, and she had a big smile on her face, and everybody in the congregation also had happy smiles. Even the preacher, Reverend Jubb, in his long white robe, had a big smile. Lizzie thought, I am so happy. I am marrying my daddy, and everything is just as it should be. She awoke from the dream feeling excited, and she lay back in her bed, wide awake, and could not get back to sleep again. So that's chapter 5 from my book. It's available at Amazon in paperback and Kindle. Thank you for listening.